Stepdad was secretly living a double life, so I exposed him to my mom. Suddenly she took his side and kicked me out of the house. Then I went to his mistress and told her the whole truth, and now mom is calling me. My name is Chloe, and I was 14 when my parents got divorced. It wasn't one of those dramatic splits you see in movies. No screaming matches or throwing clothes out of windows. Just two people who decided they couldn't make it work anymore. Dad moved several states away, and mom started dating again almost immediately. That's how Richard entered our lives. Richard seemed nice enough at first. He had a good job at some corporate firm, dressed well, and made my mom laugh. But there was something about the way he looked at me that made me uncomfortable from day one. Not in a creepy way, worse, in a judging way. Like I was some kind of problem he needed to fix. Your daughter could use some guidance, I overheard him telling mom one evening, about a month after he moved in. She's at that difficult age. I was standing in the hallway, and I remember how my stomach twisted when mom replied, "I know. I'm so glad you're here to help." But it wasn't help, it was criticism wrapped in fake concern, delivered with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. It started small, with little comments about my clothes or my hair. Then it escalated. I remember the first time he really got to me. It was during dinner, about 6 months after he and mom got married. I was wearing new jeans I'd bought with my allowance. "Those jeans are getting a bit tight on you, aren't they, Chloe?" Richard said, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "You're growing so fast." Then, under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear, "Wider, mainly." I felt my cheeks burn as tears threatened to spill. "They're supposed to fit like this," I managed to say. "Oh honey," mom jumped in. "Richard's just concerned about your health. You know how teenagers can sometimes not notice these things." That was the pattern. Richard would say something cruel, disguise it as concern, and mom would back him up. Every single time. When I tried to tell her how his comments made me feel, she'd shake her head and say I was being too sensitive. "You need to learn to take a joke, Chloe," she'd say, while Richard sat there with that smug little smile of his. "He's just trying to look out for you." I started calling Dad more often after that. Our Skype calls became my lifeline. He'd listen to me, really listen, without trying to explain away Richard's behavior or tell me I was overreacting. He kept paying alimony regularly, which I later learned was more than generous, but money couldn't fix what was happening at home. Everything changed when my half-brother was born. I was 17, trying to focus on my final year of high school, while our house transformed into what felt like a shrine to Richard's perfect little family, minus me, of course. Mom was completely absorbed in the baby. I mean, I get it, he was tiny and cute and needed constant attention. But it was like I'd become invisible overnight. The only time anyone seemed to notice me was when something went wrong, like when I accidentally woke the baby by closing my bedroom door too loudly. I expected Richard to get worse after the baby was born, to find even more ways to criticize me. But something unexpected happened. He started traveling for work, a lot. Those business trips became my salvation. The house felt lighter when he was gone, like I could finally breathe properly. Even mom seemed more relaxed, though she was always counting the days until his return. With Richard away so much, my senior year turned out better than I'd expected. I focused on my studies, joined the yearbook committee, and started making plans for college. Real plans, not just daydreams about escape. When graduation day came, Dad kept his promise and showed up. He sat in the audience, beaming with pride as I walked across the stage to get my diploma. Mom was there too, of course, with the baby and Richard, but it was Dad's face I looked for in the crowd. After the ceremony, Dad pulled me aside. "I meant what I said before, Chloe," he told me, his hands on my shoulders. "Any college you want, I'll make it happen. You've earned it." I'd already sent out applications to several colleges, hoping at least one would accept me. To my surprise, they all did. But I knew exactly which one I wanted, the one in Dad's city. Far enough away that I wouldn't have to come home often, but close enough to someone who actually cared about me. I waited until dinner to tell Mom and Richard. We were sitting at the table, Mom feeding my brother while Richard complained about airline food from his latest trip. "I got accepted to all the colleges I applied to," I said during a rare moment of silence. "I'm going to accept the offer from Marshall University." Mom paused with the baby spoon mid-air. "That's where your father lives, isn't it?" I nodded, bracing myself for their reaction. "Well," Richard said, that familiar mocking smile spreading across his face, "looks like your father finally managed to do something useful with his life. Paying for college, who would have thought?" I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. The urge to snap back at him, to tell him exactly what I thought about his useful contribution to my life, was almost overwhelming. But I held my tongue. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. Mom let out a small sigh of what sounded suspiciously like relief. Maybe she was glad to finally have me out of the way, free to focus on our real family without the complicated reminder of her previous marriage hanging around. The next morning, I packed everything I could fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Mom was too busy with the baby to notice me hauling my bags downstairs, and Richard had already left for work. Dad arranged for a car service to pick me up, and by that evening, I was standing in front of his house, a beautiful 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch. It was so different from the cramped house I'd left behind, but it wasn't just the size that struck me. It was the warmth. Sarah, Dad's fiancée, was waiting at the door with him. She wasn't what I'd expected. She was younger than Mom with bright red hair and paint-stained jeans. She gave me a huge hug like we were old friends. "We've got your room all set up," she said, grabbing one of my bags. "I hope you don't mind, but I might have gone a bit overboard with the decorating." The room was perfect, peaceful blues and grays, with a window seat overlooking the backyard. No baby crying, no Richard's critical comments, no walking on eggshells. Just peace. Mom called that night after she'd found my note. "You could have said goodbye properly," she said, sounding hurt. "Your brother was looking for you all day." "He's 2, Mom. He'll forget I was ever there soon enough." I spent those first few weeks settling into my new life, getting to know Sarah better. She was an art teacher at the local high school, and she had this way of making everyone feel comfortable. We'd stay up late sometimes, drinking hot chocolate and talking about everything and nothing. Despite Dad's offers to support me completely, I wanted to be independent. I found a job at the Daily Grind, a busy cafe near the house. It wasn't glamorous work, but I enjoyed it. The regular customers were nice, my co-workers were fun, and the tips were decent. When fall came, I moved into the dorms at Marshall University. My roommate, Jenny, was a music major from Chicago who practiced violin at odd hours but always brought me coffee when she came back from her early morning rehearsals. I was studying business administration and actually enjoying my classes, working at the cafe between lectures and study sessions. A year passed like this, and I was happy, really happy, until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon at the cafe changed everything. I was clearing tables when I heard a familiar laugh, one that made my stomach drop. There, at a corner table, was Richard. But he wasn't alone, and he definitely wasn't on a business trip. He was with a woman I'd never seen before, and they were kissing like teenagers on a first date. "Hey, Lisa," I whispered to my coworker, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Can you take table 12? I need to take my break." I ducked into the back room, my heart pounding. Through the small window in the door, I could still see them. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone and started recording. Richard was holding the woman's hand across the table now, looking at her the way he used to look at Mom in the early days. When they finally left, Lisa found me still hiding in the back. "What was that about?" she asked, looking concerned. "Did you know those people?" "The man," I said carefully. "I know him. I just didn't want him to see me working here." "Do you know who the woman was?" Lisa's eyes lit up with gossip. "Oh my God, yes. That's Catherine Morrison. Everyone knows her. She's always in the local news for her charity work and business success." That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Richard kissing that woman kept playing in my mind like a bad movie. Around midnight, I grabbed my laptop and opened social media, my fingers trembling as I typed Catherine Morrison into the search bar. Her profile popped up immediately, verified checkmark and all. CEO of Richmond Technologies, I read aloud to myself in the darkness of my dorm room. This was the same company where Richard worked. Catherine Morrison wasn't just some woman he was seeing. She was his boss, the director of the entire company. He wasn't just having an affair, he was sleeping with his own superior. I scrolled down her timeline, and that's when things got worse. Much worse. There was Richard, in photo after photo. Him at company events, always standing close to Catherine while other employees maintained a respectful distance. Him at what looked like vacation spots. Him holding a little boy, maybe around 3 years old, both of them grinning at the camera. The caption under one particularly painful photo read, "My 2 favorite men in the world. Can't wait to make it official soon. Blessed family engagement." I kept scrolling and the evidence kept mounting. There were photos going back years. All those business trips Richard took, all those times Mom was home alone with my brother. He'd been building a whole separate life, complete with another child. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I started saving the photos. One by one, I downloaded them all, including screenshots of the captions. There was Richard at what looked like the boy's birthday party, Richard and Catherine at Christmas dinner, Richard pushing the little boy on a swing. One photo in particular made me pause. It was from about 6 months ago, showing Richard, Catherine, and their son at some kind of carnival. The caption read, "Sometimes the perfect family comes when you least expect it." So thankful my Prince Charming was patient enough to wait for the right moment to start our family together. True love, destined, finally. Patient enough to wait? He hadn't been waiting. He'd been lying. Living 2 completely different lives, juggling 2 families like some sick circus act. And based on Catherine's posts, she had no idea she was the other woman. She truly believed she'd found her fairy tale ending with her handsome subordinate who'd stolen her heart. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. The Richard in these photos was so different from the man I knew. Here, he was smiling. Real smiles, not those smirks he always gave me. He looked happy, genuinely happy, playing with his secret son, hugging his secret fiancée, living his secret life. "Oh, Mom," I whispered to my empty room, "what has he done to us?" I checked the time, almost 3 a.m. I had an early class tomorrow, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. I needed to make sure I had every bit of evidence saved. Mom would need to see this. The truth needed to come out, even if it was going to hurt everyone involved. A week later, I found myself on a train headed home. The evidence was still burning a hole in my phone, and my stomach was in knots. I hadn't told Dad where I was going. He wouldn't have understood why I needed to do this. Mom looked genuinely surprised when she opened the door. "Chloe, we weren't expecting you." My little brother was toddling around her legs, and for a moment, it felt almost normal. Then Richard appeared behind them. Well, he said, that familiar mocking tone already creeping into his voice. "Don't tell me, you got kicked out of college for failing grades and need to come crawling back home?" Mom laughed like it was the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "Richard, stop it. I'm sure Chloe's doing fine at school, aren't you, honey?" I forced a smile. "I'm on the dean's list, actually." "Of course you are," Richard smirked, looking me up and down. "Say, those jeans keep getting bigger and bigger every time I see you. Is that the new style now, the baggy look?" I bit my tongue. I'd actually lost weight since starting college. All those shifts running around the cafe had toned me up considerably. But Richard never missed a chance to make digs about my appearance. The comments continued all day. Every time I moved, every time I spoke, Richard had something to say. When Mom served dinner, it got even worse. "Whoa there, Chloe," he exclaimed as I put some mashed potatoes on my plate. "Save some for the rest of us." I kept eating silently, watching him out of the corner of my eye. This man who sat here mocking me was the same one who'd been playing happy families with his boss just last week. The same man who had another child, another life. "Honey," he turned to Mom with an exaggerated concerned expression, "if Chloe's going to visit more often, we might need to invest in a second refrigerator." Mom giggled, gazing at him with such adoration it made my chest hurt. She really had no idea. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, loaded with proof of his betrayal. Should I show her? Looking at her face, so full of love for this man who'd been lying to her for years, I hesitated. After dinner, I headed upstairs to my old room, my mind still wrestling with what to do. But Richard's voice stopped me on the stairs. "Where do you think you're going?" I turned around, confused. "To my room? Your room?" He laughed. "That's my office now. We converted it months ago. Didn't your mother tell you?" Mom appeared in the hallway, bouncing my brother on her hip. "Oh, I forgot to mention it. I can sleep on the couch," I offered, trying to keep my voice steady. Richard shook his head. "You'll be in the way. Better head back to campus tonight." I looked at Mom, waiting for her to disagree, to stand up for me, to offer some alternative. Instead, she just nodded. "Richard's right, sweetie. It would probably be better if you found somewhere else to stay tonight." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the way Mom wouldn't meet my eyes, or maybe it was Richard's smug expression, but I'd had enough. "Why do you always do this?" I turned to Mom, my voice shaking. "Why do you always take his side? Can't you see how he treats me? How he's always treated me?" Mom shifted my brother to her other hip, looking uncomfortable. "Chloe, you're being dramatic. Richard just likes to joke around. You've always been too sensitive." "Joke around?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call constant mockery? The comments about my weight, my clothes, my life? He hates me, Mom. He's always hated me, and you've never once stood up for me." Richard stepped forward, that insufferable grin still on his face. Now, Chloe, let's not turn this into one of your teenage tantrums." "Shut up." My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone. "You don't get to talk anymore." I pulled up the first photo and held it up to his face. The effect was immediate. All the color drained from his cheeks. "What's that?" Mom asked, peering at the screen. "Richard? What's wrong? Would you like to explain to Mom what kind of business trips you've been taking?" I swiped to the next photo, the one of him with his other son. "Or maybe you'd like to tell her about your fiancé? You know, your boss at Richmond Technologies? The one you have a child with?" Mom's mouth fell open. The room was so quiet I could hear the tick of the wall clock. That's not," Richard stammered, his smirk finally gone. "Not what? Not your son in these photos? Not you kissing Catherine Morrison? Not your engagement announcement from 2 weeks ago?" I turned to Mom. "He's been living a double life for years, Mom. All those business trips? He's been with his other family, his other son, planning his wedding to another woman who has no idea he's already married. You're lying. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I wish I was. He's been cheating on you with his boss. They have a 3-year-old son together. She thinks he's single, that they're going to get married. Stop it. Mom's scream made my brother start crying. Stop these horrible lies. How dare you? How dare you make up such disgusting stories about Richard? Mom, I have proof. Look at the photos. Look at the dates. Look at I don't want to look at anything. You've always hated Richard. You've always tried to come between us. You're just jealous because he's a better father to your brother than your own father ever was to you. Her words hit me like a slap. I stood there, stunned, as she stormed to the front door, yanked it open, and threw my backpack onto the front lawn. Get out. She was crying now, her face red with anger. Get out of our house. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. I walked toward the door, my legs feeling like lead. As I passed Richard, I saw his smile had returned, bigger than ever. He leaned close as I passed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Your mother will always believe me over you, Chloe. Remember that. I spent the entire train ride back to campus in a daze, my mother's words echoing in my head. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I opened my laptop and navigated to Catherine Morrison's social media profile. My cursor hovered over the message button for a long moment before I finally clicked. Miss Morrison, I have some important information about your fiancé that you need to know. Would you be willing to meet in person? Her response came within an hour, regarding Richard. Of course. Is everything okay? We agreed to meet at the Daily Grind, her suggestion, ironically enough. She had no idea I worked there, that I'd first discovered her existence in that very cafe. I arrived early for my shift, changed into my uniform and waited. At exactly 2 p.m., Catherine Morrison walked through the door. Catherine? I approached her table. I'm Chloe. Her smile was genuine, warm even. Please, sit down. You seemed concerned in your message. What's this about Richard? I took a deep breath. Before I show you something, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I really am. Her smile faltered. Sorry about what? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. This is my mother, I said, showing her a recent family photo. And this is her husband, Richard. My stepfather. Catherine stared at the photo, her perfectly manicured hand frozen halfway to her coffee cup. I don't understand. He's been married to my mom for years. They have a 2-year-old son together. My little brother. I swiped to another photo. This was taken at Christmas. No. She shook her head. No. That's impossible. Richard isn't married. He told me he's never been married. We're getting married in the spring. We have a son. I know about your son, I said gently. And I know Richard told you he was single. He's been living a double life, husband and father in one city, fiancé and father in another. She sat in silence for a long moment, her coffee growing cold. All this time, she finally whispered, all those business trips home to his sick mother. He was going home to his wife, his other child. She let out a bitter laugh. God, I'm such a fool. I promoted him 3 times, made him regional director. I thought he loved me. I'm sorry, I said again, because what else could I say? Don't be. She straightened her spine, CEO mask sliding back into place. Thank you for telling me the truth. I can see now he was just using me, for my position, my influence. She stood up, gathering her things. If you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make. Thank you, Chloe. Really? I watched her walk out of the cafe, her heels clicking against the floor, her head held high despite everything. She was stronger than my mother, I thought. She could face the truth. A week after my meeting with Catherine, my phone rang. It was Mom, and before I could even say hello, she was screaming. Are you happy now? Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Are you finally satisfied? You've ruined everything. Mom? What? They fired him. That woman, his boss, she got him fired. They did an audit of all his work and found violations. They're fining him $1,000. His career is over. She was sobbing now, her words coming between hiccuping breaths. No respectable company will ever hire him again. And it's all your fault. I sat down on my dorm room bed, my legs suddenly weak. Mom, he was cheating on you. He had another family, a child. He was going to marry her. You don't understand anything. She cut me off. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. The best father your brother could have. How dare you try to destroy that? He was using both of you. You and Catherine, he was just manipulating everyone for his own benefit. Can't you see that? Don't you dare talk about him like that. Her voice went ice cold. You have no right to judge the man I love more than anything in this world. Mom, please, I have no daughter. The words came out like bullets. As far as I'm concerned, you don't exist anymore. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, tears rolling down my cheeks. Jenny found me like that when she came back from class. Oh my God, Chloe, what happened? I told her everything. She helped me while I cried, brought me tea, and helped me call Dad. He and Sarah drove up that night just to check on me. You did the right thing, Sarah kept saying, holding my hand. Sometimes the right thing hurts like hell, but that doesn't make it wrong. A year has passed since then. I'm still at Marshall University, keeping my grades up and working at the cafe. Dad and Sarah got married in a small ceremony by the lake. It was beautiful, and I was their maid of honor. Sarah's pregnant now. I'm going to have a little sister soon. I hear things about Mom and Richard through mutual friends back home. He never found another corporate job. Word got around about the audit findings. He started drinking heavily, picking fights in bars. Mom had to get a job at the local supermarket to support them. My little brother is in daycare now because they can't afford a nanny like they used to. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I wonder if I should feel guilty. Maybe if I'd kept quiet, everyone would be better off. Mom would still be happy in her ignorance. Richard would still have his job. My brother would have a more stable home.